the person of General Abdulrahman Dambazau. Like I said, he will be looking at this team from the perspective of military training and doctrine. General, sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Ezimoye, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Dean, Arts and Social Sciences, the Director of Doctrine Center, the representative of the Brigade Commander, the Registrar, and all other staff of the university, and of course, my fellow speakers. Important webinar with the theme, the role of the academia encountering extremism. And of course, my topic has to do with rejigging the armed forces, training and doctrine in countering extremism. But before I go on this, I first want to once more thank the university for giving me this opportunity to speak. To begin with, I must appreciate our soldiers, especially the fallen heroes who sacrificed their lives fighting insurgency, terrorism, violent extremism, and other violent crimes, particularly the banditry, cattle rustling, and kidnapping. No doubt also that the Boko Haram issue is no longer holding physical ground as much with hosting their flags as they did prior to 2015. So those soldiers, to me, have made a lot of sacrifice. Just yesterday, the Chief of Army Staff commissioned a project, housing project dedicated to the families of officers and soldiers who lost their loved ones while on active service. But even with the fact that the Boko Haram insurgency, rather insurgents, do not hold ground the way they did prior to 2015, it is still a fact that their presence is still felt on the fringes of Lake Chad Basin, which means the region is still under its threat. And in addition to that, unlike prior 2015, today we have about 3 groups or functions of Boko Haram. The main Shekau function, the function led earlier by the son of Mohammed Yusuf, who was the original leader of Boko Haram that split from Shekau and end up forming the Islamic State of West African province. Then the third function is the Bakura function. So which means that there's a lot of more task in fighting this issue. Not only that they split, they've also extended or have affiliations with other groups within the Sahel, particularly in Mali. We have Akim and the Islamic State of Greater Sahel. And of course, to the east, the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. We tend to conflate these issues as if they are one and the same. That is insurgency, terrorism, and violent extremism. And of course, they can appear to be in one place, but each of these has its own counter principles, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Countering violent extremism is a complex affair that requires more than military force. However, employing such force as part of the overall efforts requires a different approach from what obtains in conventional warfare. But since countering violent extremism is not the business of the armed forces alone, it therefore requires the combined efforts of all stakeholders that include the police, civil defense, civilian communities, civil society organizations, humanitarian organizations, professional bodies, religious clerics and institutions, etc. Which means that to do this, we must combine the military and civilian components. We should not forget the fact that the Northeast is one of the lowest in development indices in Nigeria. So in terms of poverty, unemployment, healthcare services, education, of course, less Islamic education because that region has been foremost in terms of Islamic education for over 700 years. Economic deprivation and inequalities, the region's scores are far below the universal standards, making it a convenient terrorist breeding ground. Furthermore, part of the region lies within the Sahel, which experiences most devastating impact of climate change, resulting in the desertification and drought, leading to forced migration of both farmers and herders. We must not forget the fact that the devastating effects of climate change have denied over 40 million people their livelihood in that region. So these are issues beyond military doctrine alone. They are issues to be tackled by good governance. In terms of percentage, therefore, I will say that civilian components of countering violent extremism will take about 80%, while that of the military, 20%. Also, the challenge of violent extremism is not limited to Nigeria, as it is now, and I have mentioned that earlier. It is a regional issue, and indeed a global one for that matter, which requires both regional and global response. So what about doctrine, rejigging doctrine? Doctrine is just a guide that has been described as a force multiplier the soul of warfare or the pivotal to success of war. It not only provides the fundamental principles by which it guides the actions of the armed forces in support of national objectives. It consists of tactics, techniques, and procedures required in battle. Doctrine is not fixed or permanent. It is a result of experience and lessons learned. Therefore, the need to periodically rejig it. And this is why I think this topic was included in this webinar. The conversation of rejigging training and doctrine of the military to counter extremism is apt. And the military has been looking at its doctrine from time to time, bearing in mind contemporary threats to national security, indeed as it affects the military itself. As a general countermeasure, therefore, the Nigerian military has in recent past reviewed its doctrine from fighting war of attrition, which requires total destruction. Warfare by attrition seeks victory through the cumulative destruction of enemies and material assets by superior firepower and technology. The long engagement in attrition warfare is meant to wear down the enemy. We have example of the Egypt-Israeli war, but these are conventional wars. From the attrition warfare now we moved to maneuvers approach to warfare. This happened some 10 years ago, of course, after I left the service myself. Maneuvers warfare is war fighting philosophy that seeks to shatter the enemy's cohesion through a series of rapid, violent, and unexpected actions which create turbulent and rapidly deteriorating situation with which he cannot cope. And I believe this, anybody, particularly the director of Buratai Center, must have studied Sun Tzu. And that is along that concept. You can win a war without actually fighting. It is directed at the enemy's center of gravity. His leadership, for instance, his weapon, and so on and so forth. Second, all the three services have at different times reviewed their order of battle, or what is popularly known as force structure. I started one reviewing for that of Nigerian Army when I was Chief of Army Staff in 2009. And subsequently, others came and continued. Today, we have, before then, when I was Chief of Army Staff, we had 5 divisions. The first division in Kaduna, second division where I had the privilege of commanding in Ibadan, which included this state, And we had 3rd Division, the Armored Division in Jos. We had 81 Division in Lagos and 82nd Division in Enugu. Those were our 5 divisions. But today the Army has 8 divisions, additional 3 divisions, looking at the nature of threats, not only in the Northeast, but also in Niger Delta, and today in the Northwest and North Central. Also, there have been more training platforms created at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels. The NDC, which I had the privilege of being a director staff and director higher military organization. By the way, director staff is a lecturer. So I was there for 2.5 years to teach. Today has been elevated to National Defense College. A separate Army War College, Nigeria, has been created to fill the gap between those who attended Staff College and those who are attending the NDC. There are also the Nigerian Army Resource Centers. These are examples from the Army. You can understand my bias. I'm not giving example from the Air Force and Navy, but they also have that. There is also expansion of peacekeeping training. When we were very active in peacekeeping while I was Chief of Army Staff, we expanded the capacity of the training to be able to train 2 battalions simultaneously. Then, just yesterday, there was commissioning of the Nigerian Army Cyber Warfare Command. So these are issues that have to do with doctrine.
Just now, my is good. If Chelsea lose, Chelsea don't qualify. No, they not my.
Specific.
Yeah. But those people know direct and 200. Direct and 200 level. No, really. And I know the now to
Specific to Boko Haram insurgency, we have seen the establishment of multinational joint task force with its own concept of operations. And of course, it has its key aim and its goals. And also, we've seen the establishment of a theater command structure, which includes Special Forces Command. But most importantly, we've seen of recent change from the concept of forward operation base to the super camps strategy. The FOBs have been dismantled in favor of the super camps because the realization that with the FOBs, the military forces were exposed to raids and ambushes and also theft of weapons and equipment. But then what the challenge has been between the super camps are focused mainly on force protection. But there is other protection that is also very important. That is civilian protection. Now, the American system, they focus on force protection because Americans do not fight on their territory. So wherever they send their forces, the most important priority is to ensure that their forces are protected. For us here, we need to be able to balance these two in whatever doctrine we adopt. And we should be able to have the response capability to quickly respond surgically in a way that is devastating to the enemy. So what kind of doctrine do we really require to counter extremism in Nigeria? It should be doctrine in line with the maneuvers approach to warfare, which we are having, but which must be intelligence driven. We need a lot of intelligence to do this job. A doctrine that will protect both the force and civilians, to be able to create a balance. You remember the attack that happened recently of Zabarmani community, in which a number of civilians were killed. So that is the kind of thing the enemy wants to focus attention on, because each time the civilians are killed, there will be uproar, and there will be bad blood against the military. They are not doing well, they are this. Everyone will forget what they have done in the past. So we must be able to protect the civilians as well as the force. In order to confuse enemy's mind, destabilize his decision cycle, loosen his cohesion, and destroy his center of gravity, our doctrine should focus on efforts to identify and eliminate the leadership, deny them acquisition of weapons, make recruitment for them difficult, if not impossible, block their sources of funding, identify and prosecute their sponsors. Most important, win hearts and minds. And to do so, we must protect human rights, rule of law. We must be able to support them with medical outreach, construction efforts like bridges or reconstructing their houses, their markets, and so on and so forth. And guarantee them protection against enemy reprisals, because we need the communities to win this war, regardless of the doctrine. So to successfully achieve all this, we need actionable intelligence, appropriate equipment and manpower, and effective command and control. We have quite a lot of challenges, but I want to stop here because I'm also need time to go back to catch my flight. So probably during interaction, I'll be able to respond accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Dambazau. We have given him that latitude to exceed the 10 minutes for each speaker because he's the lead speaker. And that's why he has to be on the ground here with us. So subsequent speakers, please, let's try to keep to the 10-minute limit. And I would like to invite Nancy Yamut, the only lady in the midst. Nancy, I hope you are set. It's your turn to tell us about your partnership with the United States Agency for International Development in countering extremism, particularly in Lebanon. Thank you. Nancy is gone.